Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, April 1st, 2026 at 2:10 in the afternoon. So we have our legislative counsel with us, Rick Sago. We will take a look and walk through the new language that's in S327. Now, we had some discussions about it today. Now's an opportunity to walk through.
Okay. Rick Sagan with the Office of Legislative Counsel, and I did catch some of the testimony this morning, so I'm aware of some maybe questions you have about the section. And we're just talking about the new section, right, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So this is draft 1.1 of 327, dated March 30th to 3 p.m. On page 7, so I want to maybe give you a little bit about what I've done here, because I don't know if you've had this happen with a bill of yours yet. So this program, the Rural Industry Development Grant Program, RIDIC, are we sure? Is that what we're gonna call it? Was created in session law in 2023. Have you all had the primer on session law versus? I could use it. Okay, I won't spend a whole lot of time, but I do want to explain some, just maybe a good opportunity, right? So this, interestingly, when I researched this amendment, I discovered that this was put into the budget in 2023. That happens a lot, where you have things are negotiated and a bill doesn't cross the line at crossover at the end of session, but then it gets put in the budget. The budget, there's like nothing that's not germane to the budget. If there's money, it's it's in the budget. So this had a bill number. I can't remember the bill number, but they had a bill number. And it was put in Title 10. But this session law, the bill, once it got put in the budget, got taken out of Title 10 and put in the session law. So session law is the same. It is law, just like the DSA, just like the Green Books. But session law, I have a copy here.
Yeah.
Do you have acts?
Over
Aren't
here.
they over here?
Oh. I haven't done it enough. Okay, so we have 2020, 2023. So Act 78, if you go to this Acts result from the 2023 session, if you go to Act 78, you'll see this along with every other law that was passed in 2023. Session law is the same as a law that goes in Green Books, but typically we use session law for temporary one-time things. It's used for budget, one-time appropriations. It's a great place for that. It's not as common to put a program that you think is going to last longer than a couple of years in session law. So I imagine they did this just because it was easy to just put it in, let's just do it, and then maybe it lasts for 2 years, 3 years, and then we won't have to worry about it. But it is a program without a sunset. So in my opinion, I think it should be in the Green Book, especially if this committee wants to keep it going, which I heard testimony this morning. It sounds like you may want to keep it going, especially if you make it a revolving, or if you don't make it a revolving fund. If you want to appropriate money to it, it would help to have it in statute. And plus, people can find it. If you are a local development corporation and you have heard about this program, if you Google it, you can probably find it and find the web page that this page here. It talks about programs, but the law is going to be kind of hard to find. So with that said, what I have done is I've struck through the entire session law that created this program in 2023. That's section 12. And section 13, I am putting it basically copy and paste with youth amendments into a new Title 10, section 6. That's our economic development chapter in Title 10. It's the first chapter in Title 10. It's kind of nice. Right there, economic development. And this is where it was going to go in 2023 until they took it out and put it in the budget. So that's my long-winded way of saying this is why I'm doing this now and kind of putting it back in. Okay. So the language I had changed has been highlighted in yellow. So even though this is all underlined, it's new law, right? Because we're moving it. It's not new language. The language already exists for the most part. So the Rural Industry development grant program is created with an ACCD. You know that, it already exists. So the current language is that it is used for business relocation and expansion efforts, including the purchase, demolition, and renovation of property for industrial use. That's where it would stop. The new language, the suggestion is you include commercial, or in the case of a federally impacted property, which is defined, residential use. So you're expanding how this grant money can be used. Definition 2, or paragraph 2, has not changed. The agency shall make grants to the program to assist LDCs with business relocation and expansion efforts throughout Vermont. Now, you may want to consider updating this. Somebody didn't catch the first time. If you want, if you want to include not just residential, sorry, not just business, but if you want to include residential use, you may want to add that in there just so you don't miss anything.
So, sorry, just going back to that first paragraph. Anything after including is not an exhaustive list. Is adding residential use there? But was it available for residential use before? Is this an actual, so if it's an actual change, does it have to be before including?
Well, so if you go up to provide grant funding through LDCs for business relocation and expansion efforts. So we might need to amend this more. So that's the kind of umbrella, right?
Yeah.
The business relocation, then that includes this. So you may want to clarify that
Yeah.
and say for business relocation, residential use.
I guess the question is, so I think we're looking at maybe two different things. At the 50%, this is what we're looking at, and at the 100%, we're including residential in that.
Right, but this is the entire program. So you have, this is the why this program exists. So you do want to include the potential for the residential use here.
Well, I think that's the question. Do we want, right? Do we want to?
I would recommend you mention it here, because if you don't mention it here, and then you say, well, if you have this federal impact property, then you can get this much money for this use. I think you probably want to at least mention that this grant can be used upon certain conditions, criteria. But we can talk about how you would do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was intentional.
Or there is the piece that I wasn't really reading. Because it's after, right?
You're talking about the last sentence of the first
Yeah,
paragraph?
yeah, I don't need to nitpick language at this point. I'm trying to really get my brain around this. Okay, I'm on the same page now.
Yeah, I'm seeing. I think what it's saying is that for the 50%, we're keeping this at a higher level so that we're looking at industrial commercial properties. I think the discussion we heard this morning was that they wanted the ability to be able to provide grants to build warehouses or commercial property. And then looking at the case of federally impacted properties, and you want residential component to that. Right? And that's.
The commas help. It is, the more I read it, like, actually, I was right. It is, so for business relocation and expansion efforts, comma, including this, comma, and then you have a new set. So the business relocation is specific for the purchase, demolition, and renovation, that's under business relocation. The commercial or residential are outside of that. That makes sense. So I think it's okay. as written.
Yeah.
You may be making more clear, I don't know if you need to. Even though we were all confused by the.
Yeah. Well, I think we're saying industrial, commercial.
Yes.
Right? But in the case of federally impacted property, then we're also going to include residential.
Right.
And does the reality that construction will blend the two make a difference? Would you only be applying the 100 to the residential portion of a project that has commercial and residential both? To clarify that.
It could be, and it could be industrial, commercial and residential. It could be all three in
Yeah.
most cases.
I'll take a
It could
stab
be
at
one, it
clarifying
could-
this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. There's enough here that we probably need to. I think I know the intent is that you want it to be any of these things.
Or all,
They're not all-
any or all.
Mutually inexclusive, right? You don't wanna lump them all into one. I got it.
Yeah.
Shall we continue?
I just had, says relocation. And expansion, it doesn't specifically say Vermont. Gonna be a loophole, somebody can take advantage of.
I believe you have to be in Vermont later on. It's just be in Vermont, but I'll flag that in my mind and I'll come back to it.
Johnson?
I had a question on page 11, line 5. Are we there yet? Or is that where you are right now?
That's where we are. So it's,
I think you mentioned of there being the throw up Vermont. I'm wondering, do we need the phrase with business relocation and expansion? Could it be to assist local development corporations throughout Vermont? If one is specifying what it's for, then do we need to make mirror language in 2 to specify what it's for again, or can we merely remove those 5 words so that 2 is more flexible?
I see, yeah, I could see the potential confusion, right? Because 2 is existing law. So if you look at 1 and 2 as current law, it makes sense. But because you're adding in the commercial and the residential use, I can see. So maybe we can, I'm not sure striking it is what you should do, or if you want to say those things again, the business relocation or
So maybe start with,
residential use.
relocation expansions, shop Vermont, and then maybe go down with the uses.
The important thing here is that this gives the agency the authority to make the grants. That's what this
That's what's for.
this is what it's,
Right.
and it's actually creating a fund. That's what this is doing. It's saying that we have this fund and now you're going to be able to make grants from it. So
Do we define the word?
I'm a little confused. So this is the program that potentially could help the Montpelier Post Office and plus Newport. Well, I remember, the mayor talking about a bunch of different uses that weren't only business relocation and expansion. Did I get something wrong? I mean, they were talking about the pit, right? And whole, and there was somebody, it was
But developing, buying.
and the first step was, actually buying this property.
Right.
And it didn't, I don't know, maybe I'm being too pedantic here, but I didn't see that. Okay, demolition. What about the I mean,
Or you can.
they're
use it
looking for some money to
Yeah,
purchase.
so you can, including the purchase. Demolition, renovation of property, so. The funds can be used for those purposes, right? And they can be an industrial, it could be a commercial. Or with federally impacted property, can be used
Okay.
for residential.
I see. I was having a disconnect between the lead in relocation, expansion and the purchase. That's fine. Close. Sure.
okay, number 3, this is new. I forgot to highlight it. But 3 is new. As used in the section, federally impacted property means real property that is A, owned by the United States or by any federal agency or an instrumentality thereof, or B, under the custody, for control of a federally appointed receiver, trustee, or conservator, and includes property subject to federal court jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That's new. Okay, B is current language, no changes to B. Grant considerations and making the grant awards, the agency shall consider the real estate needs of growing and relocating businesses, including nonprofits in the applicant's region. The ability of the proposed project to meet the site-specific needs of businesses, considering whether to expand or locate in the state. The funding that the applicant has identified or secured to leverage a grant award. And the readiness of an applicant to move a project forward. Okay, it's all current. Eligible applicants. To be eligible, an applicant must be a local development corporation as defined in 212 10 of the section, located within the state. So I have what this definition is in case you were curious. So a local development corporation means any nonprofit organization incorporated in the state for the purpose of fostering, encouraging, and assisting the physical location of business enterprises within the state, and having as its principal purpose the industrial and economic development of one or more political subdivisions, and shall include the Northeastern Vermont Development Association and State Development Company. However, for the purpose of providing assistance to small business incubator facilities, any nonprofit that enters into a written agreement with the authority, VITA, to establish, operate, and administer a small business incubator facility, including municipalities, local or regional nonprofit development corporations, and higher educational institutions, shall have the rights and obligations of a LDC under this chapter. So in order to get the grant, you have to meet this definition of a local development corporation, which is pretty specific.
Ask you about that, the subdivision 21613.
Yeah.
Is that expanding its, who else is that?
So I don't know, but I'll pull it up so we can look at it. This is a John Pucci Association of State Organizations. Okay, so this is VITA's general authority to cause to be incorporated in Vermont and nonprofit that will qualify as a state development company under 15 U.S.C. 695 and regulations promulgated. The voting members of the authority shall be members of the company and shall constitute the board of directors of the company. The company shall be organized and operate under the nonprofit corporation laws of Vermont to the extent not consistent therewith. The authority shall have the power to contract with the company to provide staff and management needs of the company. The authority is authorized to contribute to the capital of the company in an amount the authority determines if necessary and appropriate.
Is this VITA?
This is under VITA.
So is that just referring to how VITA works?
I'm going back to the definition. And any state development company organized under that. So
Just including the.
any state development company organized under the VITA authority. And I don't know how many there are. I don't have this yet, if you were there.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering just where that, the pool, who's
Right,
around that.
Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay. Back to the bill. Okay, number 2, submission 2, this is still eligible applicants. The Secretary of Commerce and Community Development may designate project and agreements as first priority based on rural communities that continue to experience insufficient economic and grand list growth.
What's the definition of your community?
Not sure it's defined here. It isn't because it's impressionable, so we don't have that definition. Do you want to propose this?
And if we would consider Montpelier or Newport a rural community.
Put a population cap on it.
Yeah, I think. What are the town or city limits? I don't know what's happening at the edges.
It is called the Rural Industry Development Grant Program. That could be, you could also rename it.
Yeah.
Population cap of 10,000.
Well, part of the problem is the whole.
The other thing we could do is, I wonder if we could do like a population density, where you take amount of population, divide it by the square miles of the town, and that would define what rural is.
Because it wasn't.
Newport City is a city,
The
even
definition
though it's
of
only
what
4,400
rural
people.
community is and doing statute.
We probably, I'll have to look for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure the feds have one somewhere too.
So, yeah, but
Our
It's gonna be different than.
That's the whole state.
yeah, that'd be the whole state, yeah. It's, Burlington's not considered an urban community, really.
No.
How many people are in Newport?
440.
10,000.
44.
10,000.
How do you Montpelier?
Less than 10,000.
It's about
A lot less.
It's 86.
But still,
it's
the
right
place with the highest per capita number of lawyers.
I'm sorry.
In lobbyists.
It's good for the town.
It's in Lobbyists.
In my day.
That's only a first priority.
Priority, yeah.
Doesn't stop it, but
He testified earlier on who has gotten money already, and I was curious to see what those areas were, but we don't have. written
Rutland.
testi-
I can pull
was
this.
that original language, Rick, and
It's BDCC, I think.
yeah, they get two. There was
These are the four so far.
one,
Wilmington.
Wilmington, yeah,
Oh, for real.
Cool.
Colchester.
and Colchester.
Well, that's what I mean about city limits. Well, that was specifically.
That's population counts. I mean, I don't know who we are.
So the other thing is when we use that.
Yeah, so let's take a look and see what we have in statute that
Okay.
defines rural community.
Okay, so subsection D, eligible activities. A grant recipient may use funding for the following. So the new language is in yellow, like it's a little bit confusing, so I'll read you the new language and I'll tell you what the old language was. To purchase real property for potential industrial use or commercial development or for residential use as set forth in subsection F of the section. The previous language is to purchase land for potential industrial use. So real property was land. And then the rest was, the yellow part was new.
What's the difference between use and development? Because industrial and residential, we say use, and commercial, we say development.
In this context, probably not a significant difference. So maybe pick one to two.
Yeah. When we say industrial use or commercial or residential, does that mean we have to pick one?
Yes.
So if we had a piece of property that they were gonna develop for commercial and residential. That,
I don't know if that would limit you. I mean, if you're gonna do one of those three. And it turned out to be two of the three. I don't know if that limits you to stick. We can make it how you want it. I read this as just one of these is enough. Yeah, it has to be one of these, at least one of these three, right? If it's more than
okay.
one, I don't read it as like limiting it just to one.
Okay,
That's my, but we need more time to think about it. I think as written, the development piece, I think we can change that to, if you want, use word development, but I don't think this limits you just to one.
but you have to have at least one.
Right. If, because there's other activities, but if you want to use subdivision one as your activity, any of those three is sufficient.
Isn't development is like actually building or constructing and uses use? So wouldn't you want it to be potential use or development or use
Of all of
or
It
industrial,
doesn't really
commercial?
matter anyway, because it says they may use funding. The grant recipient may use funding for the following. Right, doesn't say you shall.
It's true.
And this is why it's recommended that the word shall be used as the legislature, because if you want something to be done a certain way, use the word shall.
And you're saying the money can be used to purchase property, the cost of development, permitting. Or project that supports future commercial and industrial development. So it's, you are saying you can use it for one of these three or
Right.
four.
Six, actually.
Yeah, so we should be saying Greenwich
Shall.
shall
Yeah.
use funding for the following.
Yeah.
Cause then if you have made, they could come up with a seventh.
Yeah.
After the fact and say, oh, I should. Change.
That's why shall is the preferred word.
Yeah. Okay,
And then you wanted the development versus use.
Can you do both development or use, like in the sentence? Development or use?
Tell me when it would be use versus development.
Hmm.
I think we want these properties to be able to be purchased, to be developed into something,
right, yeah.
So isn't it only development?
Or would you be buying a piece of property that's already has an industrial use?
So that another business can leave. That's what I'm trying to get my brain around.
Buy this property. And some of it is for use, but you're also gonna develop additional pieces of that property. That's why I feel like you should have both in that, that could be.
I think both is the safest.
Let's let Rick noodle on.
That's why legal documents get.
All right, my note noodle. The whole, no, I know what you mean.
Divide.
Yeah, I think that the problem is the underlying, the current law says industrial use, period, or semicolon. We've added these other things, that are not just industrial use, so I think we can make it more clear.
Rick, do you have a time constraint?
No.
Can we stop for a second? We have Nick Bennett is on, and he's got a hard stop at 3, and we want to hear from him on this section of the trails.
Remote, so you don't have to move.
Yeah, you can stay there. Hi, Nick.
Hello, how's it going? Can you
Good.
folks hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Sorry, we couldn't get to you this morning.
No worries, not a problem at all. It sounds like, I mean, it was educational to sit in. There's a lot, you guys have a lot on your plate, so I appreciate you all making the time today.
Sure.
All right, let's see if I just made a request to share my screen, prepared a couple of slides with some background, with some information to share on particularly the outdoor rec economic impact study as envisioned in 327. So give me just a second. make sure can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. I will try to be relatively swift here. Just wanted to quickly note that I'm here. So for the record, I'm Nick Bennett. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association, and I am the Chair of the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And I'm here with two hats on. The VTGC is a statutorily recognized body and official advisor to the Agency of Natural Resources, has been around since 1989, and sort of represents the collective trail and greenways organizations in the state. My day job, the one that I get a paycheck for, is working as the executive director for Vermont Mountain Bike Association itself, also a 501c3, been around for just about 30 years, and represents about 9,000 individuals as members. So just wanted to kind of give a little context as to where my perspective is going to come from, which involves both sort of all trails and all stewardship organizations, but also specifically from my VIMBA, with my VIMBA hat on. To give a little background, and these are numbers that folks would have seen. I think a lot of you were in attendance at Outdoor Rec Day. You've seen these in the past. And until when we first prepared this testimony for the Senate about a month ago, these were the numbers we had to work with from 2023, which Outdoor Rec contributing about $2.16 billion to Vermont's GDP. That's close to 5%, responsible for almost 17,000 jobs. And we just saw some data, or just received some data from the Department of Tourism based on their Intercept survey that showed that close to 40% of the visitor visits that coming to Vermont are driven primarily by outdoor recreation. So if you take that 40% of 15 million, that's a lot of people coming to the state with a principal desire to recreate outside. The numbers on the right, this is if you look at the ranking of Vermont as a percentage of state GDP, outdoor rec as a percent of state GDP. For 2023, we were second in the nation. And if you look at the growth, one of the things I had prepared and touched on in Outdoor Rec Day was the fact that amongst those top 10 states, with Vermont being number 2, we were in the middle of the pack in terms of the growth of outdoor rec as a percentage of GDP from in that same period from 2022 to 2023. So this is a very quick rehash, and that put us right about in the middle of all states, 21st nationally, as a percent of GDP growth. That's the data we had back when we spoke at Outdoor Rec Day, and when I spoke with the Senate earlier this month. And I think it's relevant because just a few weeks ago, we got the 2024 data. Now, this comes from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. It's called Outdoor Recreation Satellite Account. To quickly recap kind of what the numbers spoke, we actually slightly increased the overall contribution. So from 2.16 to 2.18, a very small increase in overall outdoor rec as a contributor to Vermont's economy. As a percentage, that actually went down slightly. This gets into some of the interesting aspects of looking at percentages. But what was important, we actually lost, and I think Kelly will speak to this later, we lost, as for that data, close to 300 outdoor recreation jobs. So still over 16,000, but a decrease in jobs, and actually an increase in visitor visits as we looked in that same year. The data on the right, and this points to really directly to the rationale and the need for the study as envisioned in 327. Vermont slipped from number 2 in the nation, outdoor rec as a contributor to GDP, to number 4. So previously we had been right behind Hawaii, Montana, and Alaska slipped ahead of us in those rankings. Now, percentages could be strange. You could imagine a scenario in which, well, perhaps Alaska and Montana, their overall economy shrunk, and therefore outdoor rec was a greater contributor. So percentages don't themselves tell the story. What does tell a much more compelling story, though, is the chart on the right, which looks at GDP growth. So looking from 2023 to 2024, and 2024, again, these numbers just came out. They're the most current ones we have. Vermont's outdoor rec economy grew by less than 1%. Whereas if you look at, and that ranks 48th nationally as a percentage of GDP growth. If you look at the other states in this same top 10 as a proportion of GDP, Montana, Alaska, they're at the top. So the reason they leapfrogged us in those rankings because their economy was growing well above the national average of about 2.8%, and certainly a lot more than Vermont. And so knowing that our outdoor economy remains a vital and a super important piece of the overall economic picture, but the rate at which we're able to grow that economy is lagging behind other states. So to kind of double click on the BEA data, all this data is, again, coming from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is a very top-down view on the data. It comes from existing economic data, and essentially they look at this commodity splitting approach where they apply a share of outdoor recreation industries outdoor recreation across all various industries and use that to kind of extrapolate what the outdoor recreation economic value is in each state. So the nice thing about this approach, A, it's top down, B, it uses existing data, and it does capture total GDP impact. It's not just spending, it's not just wages. It looks at the overall, tries to look at the overall impact of outdoor rec on the economy, but it doesn't necessarily look at multiplier effects. So this is really, it doesn't necessarily get into the level of community views where the person that comes to a community or moves there and then spends money, or a person who is working for an outdoor recreation has, or outdoor recreation industry, let's say, their individual economic impact. So it's limited in some ways, but it works well in that it is sort of top down. I'll note again that all this data, we're relying on the federal government. It was supposed to come out last fall. It came out because of the shutdown later this spring, so we were late to see it. But again, looking back at the comparison between those 2023 numbers and 2024 numbers, I think it tells a pretty compelling story as to sort of where Vermont is headed relative to other states in the region and in the country. And to talk for a minute about other states, what they're doing, the reality is that many other states and regions are pursuing analyses or studies to better understand and really better harness their outdoor rec economies as a driver of economic growth. And I highlighted just a few here that are from the last 2 or 3 years: North Carolina, Minnesota, Arkansas, New Hampshire, Washington, and Oregon. All these states investing in better understanding what are the true sort of levers they can pull to continue to grow how outdoor rec is having an impact, and what are the opportunities to invest further and really to continue to grow outdoor recreation as a sort of pillar of their economies. The final bullet I added here at the bottom is the last effort we made at all as a state here. The Trails and Greenways Council actually commissioned a study back in 2016, so now a decade old, that looked at just 4 of our trail organizations to try to get at somewhat of a comprehensive view of the impact of those 4 organizations on the state. Very limited in scope to begin with, and now, essentially irrelevant when we look at how much has happened sort of pre-COVID to now. So the reality is Vermont has never conducted a detailed outdoor rec analysis, or a way to, and we're really envisioning this as a sort of an investment toolkit or investment sort of study, has never conducted one, despite outdoor recreation being such a significant part of our economy. So what was in the original 327 request, and what's still noted in the purpose, is to have this impact study that would focus and provide an analysis on a couple things. One is to better sort of define the actual pathways, the benefits to Vermont's local economies. So again, the data that exists now is extremely top down, no level of geographic specificity or how the sort of local impacts take shape. To really identify and clarify risks facing the sector, and I'll touch on some of those in a minute, but we know from the flooding that occurred certainly in 2023 and some of the more specific storms in 2024, risks like climate change, risks like landowner access are significant threats to this big economic driver. Really, the third bullet's critical to really focus on strategic outdoor recreation investments. So to identify for both public and private organizations, what are the ways that we can best support economic growth? And linking those, the state does have a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, the statewide comprehensive outdoor rec plan. That's the SCORP, often referred to or kind of captured within Move Forward Together Vermont, to link to those priorities. But those priorities are not really sort of coupled to economic development. And that's what we want this really study to focus on, is how can outdoor recreation help further Vermont's economic development. One thing I should have noted, and I will jump back just quickly because I think it's kind of the most important takeaway. If you look at this slide that notes Vermont's growth again, and outdoor recreation sector growth was less than 1%. If Vermont had merely grown at the national average of 2.8%, that would have been another $43 million into Vermont's economy. And if you even look back at it, considering most of that is sales, that's close to $2.5 million in just tax income to the state of Vermont. So thinking if this kind of looping back to the importance of outdoor rec as an investment tool, had we merely grown at that national average, that was a significant amount of overall revenue the state could have seen and could have helped address a lot of the economic austerity challenges we're facing right now. So linking back to the sort of priority of thinking outdoor rec as an investment tool. A couple of the quick notes, wanting to take a regional sampling extrapolation approach. This study, where the request was $200,000, that being mindful of that's limited in what it can accomplish. So thinking about how we can really leverage sampling to get the full picture, and focusing a couple aims that were targeted in there, thinking about stewardship. So what does it take to maintain what we have and to continue for that to serve as an engine for economic development? Look specifically, one of the things we had a bill introduced last year, worked on a bill that was focused on private landowners specifically, to recreation access recognition that would help secure access to private lands. We are continually at the risk of losing that access, despite the fact private landowners they host 70% of outdoor recreation and the public access recreation trails in Vermont. Also specifically looking at outdoor recreation business, so better understanding how the myriad of outdoor rec businesses actually drive economic benefits in the state. And then certainly specifically take a hard look at climate risk mitigation and the investments necessary there. And part of that is to mitigate risk, but also part of that is to better understand how Vermont can be positioned to really as an opportunity as climate climate changes the face of our landscape and more people perhaps come to Vermont to escape climate pressures elsewhere, to really be in a position where that can continue to actually help Vermont's economy grow. I won't go into too much detail here, but noting that stewardship, one of the big parts that the study would focus on, we've seen huge increases in use since and through the pandemic and since. We know that from the Move Forward Together Vermont survey work that over 90% of Vermonters engage in outdoor recreation in some way, shape, or form. That's well above the national average. We know that over 6 million visitor visits are being driven primarily for recreation. And we've seen across, with my VTGC hat on, trail users, usage has doubled and in some cases tripled since before the pandemic. So a lot of pressure on existing assets and wanting to better understand what investments are necessary to continue for those to deliver economic benefit to the state. The private landowner front, I mentioned that 3/4 of the trails in Vermont are hosted by private landowners with really no direct benefit or recognition to provide that trail access. And in many cases, we either have handshake or written access agreements to work with landowners, but not permanent easements or otherwise permanent security for those trails. So that represents a huge risk in terms of if landowners, and highlighted a couple of examples in the past, if landowners withdraw access, that can have huge impacts on local economies that are relying on outdoor recreation. So better understanding to what extent are private landowners responsible for providing these economic benefits, what are ways we can better secure that access on private land. I mentioned climate resilience. We saw in 2023 and 2024 how devastated all of Vermont, really, or much of Vermont, was by climate change or the summer flooding. Outdoor recreation and trails were certainly were one of the primary targets of those impacts, and needing to better understand and help identify ways that we can be better prepared for the next historic storms. And also, as I mentioned before, not purely looking at this as a cost sink, but thinking about this, where can we ensure that Vermont is positioned to be and to continue to be a destination for recreation, even in summers like 2023. So thinking about really, again, the investment tool mindset for this study, thinking where our investment is going to yield the greatest economic returns when it comes to climate resilience. And the last thing I'll note is that we have one of the huge benefits we have going into this, the VORAC Community Grant Program, along with the several other grant programs, have funded a lot of specific projects in the past. We really view this study as an opportunity to use those as a data set and to build and to better understand which of those and to what extent those investments are yielding economic returns and helping inform with that regional sampling approach, sort of where are the most valuable ways for us as a state, both at the public level and then also to guide private investment that are going to yield the greatest returns when it comes to economics. So we have a lot to work with, I guess, is the sort of takeaway in terms of VORAC, RTP, LWCF funding. There's a lot of data we can work with to study that puts us in a good position if we're able to have the resources to conduct this, or the VORAC is able to have the resources to conduct this sort of detailed impact assessment. And one more note, we have had a recent study. This was statewide, at least in the sense of looking at adaptive recreation, but Vermont Adaptive had a study funded by VORAC, just published this past spring. They referenced it at Outdoor Rec Day, that did look statewide across their specific impact. And this was working with CRO planning and design, and they found, just purely looking at Vermont Adaptive, the programming they host, the events they host, over $10 million in economic impact, 72 jobs supported, and close to $2 million in overall taxes being generated through their activity. Again, purely looking at Vermont Adaptive, but provides a bit of a template in that these type of statewide studies can be successful, and noting that this one-to-one return for every dollar invested in Vermont Adaptive in overall economic benefit. And I think that is it on slides that I had. And I just want to thank everybody again for the time, and certainly for helping support Outdoor Recreation Day earlier this month. And I'll stop there for questions.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. I know you have a hard stop at 3. I'm looking at, so many thoughts. I'm gonna see if I can just point that. have a couple of issues with the initial language in that it's so broad and it doesn't really say how we're gonna look at how to make Vermont outdoor recreation business more impactful, more expansive, more, it just says we're gonna look at it. And when I look at the adaptive program that, it's like, oh yeah, we're doing good things here. And there's no like, this is how we can make it better. And so it's really hard for us to fund a study in a time where there is no money at all that isn't going to bring us back a return on investment and give us a direction for that, how to get that return on investment. And so just for future, right? Like that was one thing that really jumped out at me here. And I love our outdoor economy. I love our outdoor businesses. I use them all the time. I think this is one of the things that makes Vermont such a special place. And we can't just, talk in circles, right? Like, I mean, Hawaii also didn't grow their outdoor economy much because maybe there isn't a whole lot more growth to do. And maybe there isn't a whole lot more growth for us to do either. I don't know that answer, right? But I can make the numbers make sense to my brain in all kinds of different ways. So I just, I appreciate this and I appreciate this thought, and I just would like it to be a lot more pointed on improving that return on investment.
No, it's a great point. And I think one of the things we want to cast this as is really, as we look, we now have a list of priority actions for Move Forward Together Vermont, which is, that's rec plan for the state. We have nothing to really provide as an investment guidance for those decisions. So things are going to be informed in terms of how do we prioritize those priorities and what are the specific things we do. And I like the way you framed it and noted that what we really want and need is something that's going to inform return on investment and help understand, as the state and private organizations look at investing in these outcomes, what are the ones that are going to move the needle most for Vermont, not purely looking at, as you mentioned, how it works, which is important. We don't have a great sense of the actual pathways for impact, but understanding isn't enough. It needs to, and I think that's language where even noting that, and I can't recall if it's in the language here, but that coming up with a specific through the bill set of recommendations. What are the top 10 or what have you investment priorities? What are they worth? How does the state help support, either through public-private partnerships or through grant funding, what have you? What are the mechanisms that are going to go after those investments? So I think that's very much our desire too, I guess I would say, is for this to be action-oriented, not purely, for the understanding of how all this works.
Thank you.
Purely academic, yeah.
Yeah, as we talk about outdoor recreation, and I feel like we miss a section of outdoor recreation, which is snowmobiling and ATVs.
Ask the question, is that included?
Is that included?
Yes, it definitely is. Yeah, and both VAST and VAST are members of the council, and they're very much absolutely a big part of that. Both study is envisioned here, the work we do. So motorized recreation is a huge driver of that overall economic impact.
I know that ATV trails are few and far between in the state of Vermont. And I think they're few and far between because the ones in the central Vermont area, I've ridden them all. And it gets people outside and all that wonderful stuff. But I also think of places like Kentucky, which have huge trail systems. And it brings, I just quickly looked it up, like $1.9 billion to their economy, according to Gemini. Whether or not that's true, I did see a PDF that said something about transportation.
So one of the challenges with economic impact studies is that they're very good at giving you a huge number, right? I mean, that's just sort of how they go. And I wanted to ask about the adaptive economic impact study that you do with CRO planning and design. I think you've done a couple of projects with them, perhaps. Is that component of every $1 the ASS spends earns an additional $1 of economic impact? did that surprise you in terms of its quantity? Because a lot of times we hear that number, every dollar, this gives us that. And today we heard one that was like over $40. And so, but this is about a component of the outdoor economy that's like very specialized and one that can provide people with experiences that they cannot have otherwise. So it's also in a money well spent kind of bucket. So to speak. I was wondering though if by including that point about the 1-to-1, was that surprisingly good news for you? Had you expected it to be more of an investment than a break even or boom? I'd just like to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, great question. The reality is those numbers are, I wouldn't say all over the place, but we see estimates. I think National Park Service had something like 7-to-1 when they looked at investments in park infrastructure related to economic activity. So things that were very high. When you kind of average out, honestly, that doubling or in that sort of at least generates a net return, if not twofold return, threefold return. Those are what studies often kind of land on when they look at the specifics. So that it's not surprising, I guess I would put it that way. I think your question's a good one. Sometimes it depends on what you look at as economic activity. And one of the importance of conducting a thoughtful study is, are you looking at, it's important to, for example, focus on net dollars actually coming into Vermont. It's not just people moving around and money they would have already spent on food here, they're spending there. These are some of the nuances of the study, but looking truly at net dollars coming to the state. So I would say it's not surprising at all, knowing in a lot of Vermont Adaptive, their economic activity is driven by things like events they host, which brings, and I think they had data in their report that looked at for every outing they have, which includes an adaptive, an athlete, they often bring 2 or 3 people into the state with them, and they're bringing a lot of people from around the region. So when you start to factor in those sort of multipliers, it doesn't surprise me at all. And that's where a lot of this impact really will be. It's going to be from people coming into the state, again, 40% right now currently being driven by outdoor rec as a primary driver. And then the other thing these studies don't touch on at all, and another thing we would love to have baked into this, is the relocation element. This is a huge reason. I mean, I'm an example. I lived out in Washington State until 2020. One of the main reasons I moved to Vermont was because the proximity and accessibility of outdoor recreation. That's how we're going to drive youngish people with families and kids to the state. It's a big attractant. So the short answer is like, it doesn't surprise me. It is important to dig in and understand what that number is including, and the ability to conduct a study where we direct that is really valuable.
Thanks, Nick.
Other questions? So, Nick, I don't feel that we're going to be too successful in finding dollars. Have you been able to look at maybe NBRC or any USDA money that may be available to do that study?
We're looking everywhere we can. I think it's a good point. Some of those funding sources are constrained in terms of what we're able to look at, the sources we're able to use, but we are turning over every cushion because, again, I think particularly when those 2024 numbers came out, your point is a good one that they're not. You can look at them in a couple different ways, but for us, I think that signaled that we're definitely at risk of falling behind here. So yes, we're looking elsewhere to the extent those dollars are available. And I think the challenge of those dollars is everywhere. And I think for us, we're hoping too that very much understanding that this is an extremely austere environment, dollars are hard to come by. That element of if we're able to, this is such a significant driver of economic activity in Vermont that small gains in that overall impact can result in significant both GDP, but then critically the tax revenue that can help support this. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, we're looking everywhere, but I don't think we have any hot leads that we're likely to fill this need anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we can have the conversation, but I don't feel too confident. Unfortunately.
Well, more than anything, we appreciate the time and consideration and really just being able to sound, I don't want to say the alarm, but at least the call a little bit of that. Again, we've never really invested in understanding and leveraging this as an economic engine. It's been nice to have, it exists. We kind of rely on the nonprofit stewardship organizations primarily to generate a lot of the the reasons people are coming to the state. The opportunity, if we're able to really lean in and use it as a lever, I think is one that we're really keen to continue to work with this committee, legislature, and as you noted, other funding sources to pursue that, because I think we believe that's a huge opportunity and potential to help pull us out of the austerity, sort of that, or at least a aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree. Emily?
You may have covered this. Hi, Emily Karras Duncan, Wilmington, Whitingham, Halifax. But I'm curious to know, with the outdoor industry kind of being in a lot of other states that can accommodate it, and just looking at your numbers, it seems like we're experiencing increased competition from other states. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely fair to say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I really do appreciate you bringing this to us. I feel like the outdoor recreation industry in various capacities has been something that Vermont has always leaned on, but I do also just have to register my agreement on the record that we could be leaning into this, and I think it would be a really important economic driver in addition to the arts and all the other stuff we do.
And I think that's a great point. I mean, we do have concern too that if we're outpaced by our neighbors in the region, you know, that this 40% of people of those 60 million visitor visits coming to the state, if they decide to take a right turn and go to New Hampshire instead, that's going to have real impacts on Vermont.
Yeah, we also don't have a coastline like many
True.
of our other
or
neighbors.
a volcano like Hawaii, or you know,
or a volcano. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a border that's people aren't coming across either.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Canada is a great example too. I mean, part of this study should look at those assessing elsewhere, but Quebec has invested a tremendous amount in their outdoor, speaking specifically for mountain biking, the trail centers that they've developed. That those people aren't coming from tariffs and other political reasons, but they might not come back in the same numbers because their home province is investing significantly in infrastructure.
Well, and you look at just the ATV trail system that they have up there, it's incredible compared to what we have. Yeah. They do embrace all things outdoor Quebec.
There happens to be a bill on the wall. I don't know where it is. It's probably in environment about ATVs.
Yeah. Okay.
Mine.
Okay. Anything else for Nick? Okay, Nick, thank you.
Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you as well. Kelly? Is Kelly on? Yep.
Yes. Yes. Hello, I'm here.
Kelly.
Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon. And I appreciate being able to follow Nick on many of the similar economic development themes. So I can share my screen and continue the conversation. For the record, Kelly Ault, Executive Director of the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay.
Yep, here we are.
All right, I'll hit slideshow here. Great, thank you. Well, thank you again for having me, Kelly Ault, Executive Director of Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance. And as I've shared with this committee before, VOBA is a statewide nonprofit organization established in 2018 to strengthen Vermont's outdoor economy. We educate Vermonters about outdoor recreation and businesses about opportunities to collaborate, develop their business, and support outdoor recreation policy that invests not only in our economic development needs, but also the landscape and the recreation infrastructure of which we depend on for our livelihood. So I'm here today to build upon what Nick has shared with you about our $2.2 billion economy, which in 2024, as you heard, increased slightly, but really were outpaced by our peers. And so we know that we have some work to do to address some of the economic challenges that have been hitting our state over the years, from flooding, and then in this past year from some of the economic challenges, which I'd like to run through, not in detail, but as you've heard it before, but just to reiterate some of the system challenges that our economy is facing. And if not infused with investment or business support, we could continue to see that downward trend in our economic impact, and as well as that trend to which we have also slipped in certain industries like retail, manufacturing, and guiding services. So wanted to share some of the main themes that we have discussed before, but just to reiterate that we are looking at some of these headwinds, even though we've had a tremendous winter and that has really buoyed the industry through the holiday season, through the winter season, we still continue to be burdened by the cost of tariffs to businesses. A recent report identified that Vermont companies have paid $110 million in tariffs in 2025. And of course, that's every business, not just the outdoor industry, but the stories told by businesses as they've been able to summarize their numbers from 2025 are significant. Not just small companies that are paying 20% of their revenue in tariffs, but well-established businesses that were paying $200,000, which was equal to their net revenue for the whole year. So we're really seeing some big impacts, which will set companies back, and they've had to make some changes by cutting staff, cutting marketing, really also rolling back their innovation. And that has been really a sweet sauce, or a special sauce for the industry in being able to innovate and be ahead of the trends. And so we're going to be seeing some stalling on that level. We just talked about outdoor recreation participation, and even though we do have some tremendous numbers, we have had this border issue, and the businesses have validated with the numbers that their traffic was down. A Burlington independent retailer is looking at a long time trend of reduced foot traffic and customers, which really impacts their ability to staff up and supply what they need for users of the outdoors. We're also seeing the tourism industry and hospitality industry continue to be hit by 20% less Canadian visitors and higher percentages in terms of specific services or reservations. I think the big one that we have been doing a lot of work on is looking at climate impacts, and not only just trying to really address the needs from the big events like the 2023 and 2024 floods, but also looking at these ongoing shifts in climate and seeing seasonal shifts and seeing heat and drought as being factors in some of our outdoor recreation opportunities, especially in waterways or with fishing. And we have done a partnership with Climate Action Office, Department of Labor, that has also involved the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, the Office of Workforce Development and Strategy, that has tried to identify what are some of those climate scenarios that the sector is facing. How are they identifying adaptations and resiliency measures for how they can be more stable in an event, and even be more proactive and see as positive opportunities for business by shifting some of their business needs. So that's becoming a large opportunity, and we're really getting some good information and good data in that area of what are those investments that can be made either by an individual industry or by the industry as a whole, by private sources and public sources, to really support the climate resiliency of the sector and therefore lend those benefits to the communities that they live, that they are located in, or that they serve. So we are here to echo the support for the Outdoor Recreation Economic Impact Study, and I don't need to reiterate what Nick has said, except to say that the BEA data has been very helpful and positive in providing this baseline and this overall comparison with other states, and also year to year. But we don't really have that multiplier effect in the local communities or in regions. And we know there's great potential to understand the impacts, not just from infrastructure investments, but also businesses investing in their communities and their workforce, which are our neighbors and our residents. We also know that this study can really help us pinpoint some of the alignment and the opportunities for investment in the Move Forward Together Vermont vision. And VOBA's 5-year work plan is very much focused on economic development, and we have a lot of goals in that work plan, and it would be great to have the data to really help us think about where can we best put our resources to see those outcomes that we seek. Some of them are in economic development and others are in climate resiliency. And so that's really a value of the economic impact study. The second ask I'd like to talk about today, which is not in S327, but it's an ask that you all supported in your budget memo, and that is to support funding for VOBA's Outdoor Entrepreneur Program. And we would be going into our fourth year of really supporting this technical assistance and business support to small and mid-sized companies at all stages of their development. The needs have ranged from strategic and financial planning, market analysis, and access, as well as climate adaptations. And responding to some of the challenges, the headwinds that I just spoke about is the real priority for this work, and would continue to be a resource to businesses to help them navigate some of the uncertainty that they're currently facing or that they anticipate facing into the future. This is just a little bit more detail on the economic study, although you've heard quite a lot from Nick, so I don't know how much I can add, but just thinking about the business elements, he talked a lot about the stewardship and the infrastructure, and understanding, what kind of return of investment we have on that, the relationships with landowners that are providing public access recreation. But I just wanted to reiterate from the business community and the industry side that understanding the direct and indirect outdoor recreation business inputs and outputs would be really helpful for that local decision making, as well as a sector and as a state. And the climate resiliency measures, as I mentioned, we're starting to identify really what the desires of the industry are, and we really want to make sure that we move forward with some of the best ideas for innovation and stabilization. VOBA's Outdoor Entrepreneur Program, I've shared this information with you before, I believe it was last February, but just as a very quick summary, that the years that we have been running our business development services have allowed us to serve 100 entrepreneurs and curated a network of 30 business and financial advisors, trade and marketing, and planners offering specific expertise. We've worked closely with some of the other business development providers across the state, and we've been able to leverage support and resources and partnership with the state through the Department of Economic Development, as well as the Department of Tourism and Marketing. We've been able to attend trade shows with some of the STEP grants. We've been able to host an Outdoor Gear Makers Festival with some of the marketing sponsorship, and then been able to host Pitch Fest coaching, financing workshops, and many other very tailored programs to businesses that are seeking specific assistance in growing their business and wanting to take time out of their business to strengthen their business. And that has been really beneficial. And this is just another example. We did a capital strategy cohort, and then last May, we did a very large forum around business agility, and that was in response to the tariffs, and just trying to put the finger on the pulse and develop some of the experts around the state that could support this sector, and we hope to continue to do that work. So in summary, we would really appreciate your consideration of the investment in the Outdoor Recreation Economic Impact Study. I understand the austerity situation of our state budget and of the many needs that exist, but we appreciate the opportunity to share this need and to reinforce support for it. And the VOBA Outdoor Entrepreneur Program also as an example of a small amount of money that can lead to a big impact on the ground in supporting small businesses throughout our state and supporting our needs. So that is what I have to share with you today. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Any questions for Kelly?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Okay. So Rick,
Back to me.
back to Rick.
Okay. So, we're pressing sharing. So we're kind of lost sharing, trying to get it back in. Talking about the rural industry development grant program. We're under page 12, under subsection D, the eligible activities. So we went over one to purchase real property, which by the way, I didn't talk about this, the current language is land. So the request is to change land to real property. Real property is land plus whatever's on the land, so that could be a building, or some kind of structure, but it also includes township. Okay, 2, for the costs of site development, permitting, or providing infrastructure for a property the recipient owns, that's current language. 3, for a project that supports future commercial or industrial development as outlined in a development program. This, we use the word development, so we may want to align these two, 3 and 1. Is what I'm talking about. 3 is new, brand new language. And I would want to know what a development agreement is. Is that something that is common? We don't have that defined, development agreement, so. What that is, I don't quite know. I assume the people that do these things know what that is, but Mr. Chair, the word development agreement at the end, it's not defined. So I'm not quite sure what that's referring to. Is it just the contract that you have to develop some type of parcel of land? I don't know.
It seems to me this would be, in order for them to get the money, they had to come up with some criteria. Be an agreement of some sort.
Yeah, but they may not have the development agreement
Yeah.
ready, like
Yeah.
for purchasing the pit. They're not gonna have a development agreement. Yeah, they're gonna have an intention.
But I would think with a grant program, you're the grantor and someone comes, I need some help here. And they apply for it. And the grantor would say, well, that's fine, but here's what we want you to do. And I would think that could either be in the form of the grant agreement they agree to, fulfill. Or some agreement like what Rick is talking about, probably could be. I think
right.
it could use some better
problem.
specificity
Right.
one way or the other.
Not, yeah, my point is that this is not a term of art. This is
Correct.
a development
It's like
agreement,
May
which used to
use
be,
funding for.
can be oral, like there's no, if I want to be more specific on what, if you have something in mind, what is this thing that we're talking about,
Well, the grant should definitely needs to be a little more specific about what's intended, what are they intended, what's going to be fulfilled.
Sorry, I'm not sure how it's different from one potential development.
Well, in one, you don't have that
You don't have like.
phrase limiting somewhat. I don't, I guess my point.
Right,
I
it's
don't- I
more
don't see the
limiting than
point.
one.
Right.
Yeah, right.
It also feels like with a development agreement, we're getting into chip territory.
I was thinking the same thing, that we had that discussion last year with chips, right? That,
Thankfully, my bill.
municipalities and the developer can get together, come up with a development agreement.
It makes sense for us to look at the RIDIP application. I mean, it exists, and we're modifying an existing
Mhm.
program. See what they ask for and.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if we wanted to, just. Text them, right?
On your own time.
But I think it'd be worthwhile to see that just how it is that currently the funnel is bringing in, at this point, it sounded like there were 6, 4 of which have been awarded, maybe there's 2 more not. And whether how this language is interfacing with what we're expecting.
So it's, again, that may word is still there, that probably should change the shall.
Mhm.
And then these are the eligible activities that you can apply for. So if you're purchasing real property, if you're having site development, if you have a development agreement with a developer to do something commercial or industrial. If you're using it for equity investment to get a loan transaction through Vita. I mean, there's,
What we think about that, I'll four. This is current language for the equity investment required for a loan transaction through Vita. There's a couple of loans, there's the. Hold on a second ago. The loans for speculative buildings, and small business incubator facilities. And loans for industrial park planning and development projects. So current language. 5, for the matching requirement of another state or federal grant consistent with this section.
are we saying matching requirement for? Are we talking about state of Vermont or another state?
So capital S means Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question. Are we still imagining that this would be administered by Vita?
This is ACCB.
Oh, this is ACTD, okay,
That's a grant, we're turning it into a grant program.
right, okay, that's all.
Okay, 6 is new for the purchasing, holding, and renovation of property for the repurposing or the redevelopment of a federally impacted property. Which we have defined. We don't say for residential use here, it might. If you want to make sure. Let me see, make sure this aligns correctly. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I'm going back to the first part of the statute where we say industrial, commercial, or if it's a federal impacted property, residential. But apparently the bill would not limit it to just residential. If it's federally impacted, it can be still commercial
Right. Or industrial.
or industrial. Okay. So that's okay. But residential only if it's federally impacted. That's the limitation. If you want it,
Right.
so currently that's the way it's written.
Right.
Okay, no changes to the application process. They shall include a local and regional market assessment that demonstrates reasonable need for the proposed development. And identifies imminent potential for existing business growth opportunities. An applicant shall submit the following to demonstrate a readiness to begin and complete the project. A, community and regional support for the project. That grant funding is needed to complete the proposed project. And ability to manage the project with requisite experience and a plan for fiscal viability. And a description of the permitting required to proceed with the project and a plan for obtaining the permits. So no changes to that. Keep moving on. Awards, some changes here. Okay, so current law, nothing is struck through because again, this is new. I'll tell you what the current language says. An award shall not exceed the lesser of 1 million or 50% of the total project cost, subject to the exception in subdivision B. So currently, it's the lesser of 1 million or 20%. So this bill would increase it to 50% of the total project cost. However, an award shall be 100% of the total project cost, but shall not exceed 2 million. So you have a limitation there.
So if, say a project came in at, they were talking 2 million, it met all the criteria. Can the secretary decide that can only use 1.5.
Well, so you're talking about B? It's got the B.
Yes.
So if the project costs 2 million.
Yeah.
This would restrict it to the 2 million.
But can the secretary lower that amount?
Whatever the total project cost is.
So they could, but they could tell them that you're not meeting something in the criteria.
Right.
You have to come back with another,
If you want.
or we
these-
don't have 2 million left.
Right. If you want the secretary to be able to make that decision, you could say up to two, yeah, you would, there's a different way to word it.
Yeah.
I worded this to restrict the secretary to say if it's got these and I'm gonna get to it, if it meets this criteria, it's 100%. But you can't exceed 2 million because.
Right.
Okay, so 100%, but not exceeding 2 million, if the property is classified as a federally impacted property, which again could be commercial, industrial, residential. And the secretary certifies that the project is located within at least 2 of the following. A designated downtown development district, a rural economic area partnership program, a REAP zone, it's a federal program. I believe it's federal, a federally declared, it is, right? A federally declared natural disaster area, provided the declaration was made not more than, that should be 5, not 2, that was my mistake. More than 5 years from the application date. So 2 to 3. If it meets 2 to 3, the way it's currently written is that the secretary and it meets the other criteria would have to fund it 100% up to 2 million. If there's only 500,000 left, then it would be 500,000.
I guess maybe one question would be, should it be? If we're looking to do 100%, should it be in a designated downtown period? And then it needs to meet one of these other 2 criteria. Because we're talking about allowing residential as well.
How does that connect to the proposed switch?
So if we're going to 100%, so we're saying it has to be a designated downtown and, well, it has to be either a designated downtown or it's in a REAP zone with a federally declared natural disaster that happened more than 5 years within the last 5 years.
You want to be sure that it'll be in a part of Vermont where that amount of residential addition will be desired and like no speed bumps.
Right, that, so we're talking tier 1.
Yeah,
That, so,
okay, I get that.
right,
So you want ruminant I. And then one of the last 2.
Yeah.
So.
does that make sense to everybody? No.
Located within a designated downtown development district.
Yeah.
And at least one of the following.
Right, yeah.
And this is specifically dealing with the federally, what do we call them?
Federally impacted.
The federally impacted property, or is, okay,
Yes.
not for the rest of,
No.
okay.
Yes.
My only one question is, do we have any other federally impacted properties that are in non-designated downtown areas?
Sure, I mean,
Okay,
when you're looking at the floods that have happened and
yeah. I'm wondering if we are designing this to go forward, if that limits things too much.
well, this is for 100%,
But, and
but
Yeah.
previous, the 50% doesn't have these limitations.
it doesn't have this, but I guess, so then my question is, are we treating the federally impacted properties the same? Do we need to be treating them the same? If the conundrum is sort of similar in that the federal government is not taking responsibility for them.
I don't know that there are the communities that have building that is owned by the federal government that has been impacted
In the same
in this,
way.
right?
Okay, that's what I was curious about. Okay, thank you.
I've been wondering about that as well, because as using the section for the impacted property, is really just two things. It's just any federally owned building, or it's under the custody or control of an appointed receiver.
Right.
And so it did seem like, well, when was the last, so I'm thinking of the various, the armories and readiness centers that the National Guard is using. How long ago how many of them are in a, I guess there's a town that had a disaster declaration? Or
But would they be in the designated, that part of the designated?
yeah, so now it's sort of helping winnow it a little bit.
Right.
But anyway, it did, but also honestly, I would prefer that there be that there be a variety of potential, that feels good. That our criteria are not so specific, that this is a viable thing that one encounters in Vermont. Which I think is just not a bad thing there.
Okay, we'll continue. The rest is as currently written, and there are a couple links that are removed that I want to highlight when I finish this part. 2, this is the award section. A recipient may combine grant funds with funding from other sources. The agency shall release grant funds upon determining that the applicant has met all application conditions and requirements. A grant recipient may apply for additional grant funds if future amounts are appropriated for the program and the funds are separate but eligible use.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, this language would turn the roughly 2.5 million that has already been appropriated into grant funds as well. Is that correct?
So that's what I was getting to next. Hard to read. This section is removed, so it's not struck through because this is new language, right? Current law at the end of the grant program says the agency shall include deed restrictions that require the return of the principal amount to the state. Or KHS for some reason, and may require the payment of a percentage of the sales profit. So that's current law. So if any of these 4 projects that have been currently awarded, the deed restriction should have in it that if they sell the property, that you would pay back the grant you were given. That's one thing. So if this were to pass as
It has a deed restriction in it.
there's one other paragraph that's been removed.
Yeah, but they may require the payment.
May require. But it can go up to,
Okay.
this has also been removed, so it wasn't in the language. The agency, this is not in the new bill, the agency shall ensure an accounting of the respective state and grantee shares of investment in the property be maintained to refund the state an appropriate share of any net proceeds resulting from the future sale or transfer of such property acquired or improved through such a grant awarded under this program. So I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
That if you sell it, you have to give the money back that you were granted. So removing this line and removing the deed restrictions would, at this point, make it a pure grant program.
Right.
And now it's a loan, it's kind of a loan fund, although you wouldn't call it that, because you have to sell it in order to give the money back. But if this were to pass as written, it would just be a grant. And if you sold it, you wouldn't have to return it.
That require notice to the people that.
Good question.
I'm ready.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for you.
Or
If it requires notice to the current recipients.
You may want to add a section dealing with that. Because you may have deeds that have this, if they did it where the law tells them to do it,
Yeah.
then the deed restrictions are still in there.
Right.
And I would need to research how to undo that.
Right. There's a few questions Rick's gonna check out for us. what the definition of rural community.
Oh, I
is.
was gonna, Colchester is 17,500 and they've already received money. So I think
It's hard to understand how.
all of Vermont is rural.
That's, there is a, there was a definition.
You know,
It's the
my,
name of the program.
Yeah, but
we can just use the federal definition.
Yeah, the federal definition just pointed
so
to
we
the
just
census.
change the. Change it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of rural, I think of small communities,
Yeah, we could just take the name out, change the name, yeah.
don't think about that too.
Under 10,000 is a small community.
In
Is
Colchester.
that a rural community?
That's
Yes.
in Michael's world.
I thought it was under 10,001.
Sure. And you can put it at 8,500. I'm fine with that too.
Okay,
It is called the Rural Industry Development, so you are also adding resident. Yeah, so maybe consider renaming the program.
yeah,
I think it's gonna help.
Name the name.
maybe industrial community development.
So it's not community
Okay.
development.
We'll think about it, John.
And I think it is worth, I guess that's good to think a little bit about how what the program, the idea of having this industrial development activity was that we would have more places to add jobs and to, it feels like it's just important to sort of think through how that's still a need that we have.
Right.
And I think, so, I just want to make sure I'm talking about that program existence for a need that we have. We just made it, I think, too restrictive to really get the uptake we want to see. So I'm glad to see thinking flexibly is.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anybody any good in a vacuum.
Well, it doesn't do any good, that's $2.5 million sitting in a fund that's not being utilized.
That's right. That's
It's
what I
time
mean.
to, yeah,
Yeah,
it's time to get it invested. And hopefully we can get more money into the program at some point.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. We'll, I think next week we'll continue to discuss more. And what are we going to include? I think we need to talk with appropriations as well. Do we need language around the appropriations, like the professions of color, the 150 to the Montreal investment, the Montreal initiative or Canadian initiative or whatever.
International business.
Yeah, what else?
Small Business Development Center.
We don't have money for that yet.
We need Vermont, state conference.
Since David,
Yeah.
there's some money in the budget for them, right?
Or-
SBDC.
Well, it's their regular, it's
So,
their,
yeah,
there's no extra dollar, but they're in base already. I don't think we need language for that,
okay.
but the one-time dollars that are in there, I wonder if we want to talk to folks and see if we need language for that.
And Linda had told me that there might be an opportunity for more federal money if they have more of a match. I can ask her if that's correct. And she,
They
See
have
if they can-
just under 400,000 in base.
yes, which is like,
And it may be. Yeah, I don't, yeah, it may be something that gets hammered out in conference. Maybe something that. the Senate may want to do, I don't know. Okay. This language that we just went through, are people okay with continuing that discussion? Okay, I think it's a good program and. Newport's not one of my towns anymore. Certainly do appreciate it because Newport's really taken it on the chin.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's,
they have.
I think it's travesty. My only questions are, the money issues.
we've just been through a budget process and we couldn't find the money for lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And you guys know better than I, what opportunities are out there, but
Because this is existing dollars that we're not asking for new money, so. And I think, if they start getting applications. I would think they would move the administration to really look at that program next year when they're developing the budget. And see what they can. See what they can do. Okay. So tomorrow, 9 o'clock, we're in room 11.
Right.
9:10, and we are going on to PTC, Randolph. Magic bus for the magic bus is gonna be our buses. Building futures. And we're back on here on the floor at one. So, I don't think we're going to have anything after the floor. Tomorrow.
There's a caucus.
There is a caucus. To talk about the education, so I don't know that we'll plan on anything for that. And again, Friday, we're done. Later than noon, so
Sorry.
we won't be working Friday afternoon.
right.
It's Good Friday, today's Passover.
That's Friday.
Found out like
Good Friday.
They take Good Friday off.
So with
Love the break, right?
that,